Universal could be acquiring some of the biggest brand IPs in the world, and it has huge ramifications for their theme parks. Hello everybody, welcome. Universal officially enters the fight to purchase Warner Brothers Discovery, and if this happens, it would be a theme park industry game changer. One of the biggest strengths of any theme park are their IPs. This is intellectual properties. Essentially, these are the brands, these recognizable brands that they bring into and leverage in their theme park. These would be things like Marvel and Star Wars, Indiana Jones, Jaws, Back to the Future. These are some examples of recognizable IPs. Now, decades ago, IPs weren't as prevalent in theme parks as they are today. If you think about Walt Disney World and Disneyland back decades ago, it was all about creating new interesting themes or worlds just from scratch. Now they did bring some of their movies, their IPs into their parks, but you have things like Tomorrowland, Space Mountain, Haunted Mansion, Pirates of the Caribbean, these types of IPs that were just created out of the ether, things that they just invented and added into their theme park. Interestingly enough, you take something like Pirates of the Caribbean, that eventually turned into a movie, a film franchise, which became a very recognizable IP for them that they then fed back into their theme park and expanded Pirates of the Caribbean to be more in line with the film series. But more recently, theme parks have been turning to recognizable IPs, and this is because they know that there's already a demand for a particular IP. You think of something like Star Wars, it has a huge following, a huge fan base, and Disney brought them into their theme parks because they knew that it would be a hit right out of the gate. They didn't have to drum up interest for Star Wars. The interest was already there, and so it's a great way to draw people into the parks. You think about Halloween Horror Nights at Universal Studios, and they have a lot of newly created worlds or haunted houses that they build, things like Graves of Flesh or Dead Man Winter's Wake. These are things that they just invent. But those aren't the things that draw people into Halloween Horror Nights. What draws people to go and gets people most interested in attending Halloween Horror Nights are the big brand IPs that they bring in, like a Friday the 13th Jason Universe, or Last of Us, or something like Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So over the years, it has turned more and more into theme parks building and creating attractions and lands around IPs that are already very recognizable and probably very recently been successful. Not things that are 30, 40, 50 years old, but things that are more successful in maybe the last decade. If you look at the way Disney handles their IPs, they have moved to a strategy where they only bring owned IPs into their parks. They're trying to transition away from licensing IPs. Right now, in all of Walt Disney World and Disneyland, the only IP that they've brought into their parks that exists still today that they don't own is Twilight Zone Tower of Terror. That's the only remaining IP in all of Disney World that they don't own, that they license. Universal, on the other hand, has taken the tack of bringing in owned IPs, but also licensing out other popular IPs. And that's because there are a lot of interest in these other IPs that they don't own, and a lot of the IPs that Universal owns are starting to get a little older. You think of like Jaws and Back to the Future. There haven't really been any recent Jaws or Back to the Future films in quite a while, so the interest hasn't felt as high as something more like a Harry Potter series. So of course the positives of bringing an owned IP into your park is you own it. You don't have to pay any licensing fees or anything to keep it in your park, and there's no real threat of it ever disappearing and losing the license for it. The downside is if you don't have any really relevant and amazing IPs hitting on all cylinders right now, you don't really have anything to bring into your parks. Disney has some spectacular owned IPs. They've got tons of princesses and all this stuff that they can create constantly where they don't have to go out and license IPs. They have enough internally, and the things they're creating new things like Moana and Encanto that people just love, and then they create attractions on them. But that being said, Universal owns a lot of fantastic IPs, some of them more relevant than others. You look at things like Jurassic Park, great IP, Fast and Furious, the Jason Bourne series, Back to the Future, E.T., Jaws, the Minions, the DreamWorks franchise, Dr. Seuss, and of course, Blumhouse when it comes to all things horror. They, on the other hand, license things like the Marvel Universe. You think of the Marvel Superhero Island and Islands of Adventure. That is all licensed now, licensed from Disney. They also have Harry Potter. That's the biggest example of a licensed franchise that they've brought in, and it's been hugely successful. However, Harry Potter is owned by Warner Brothers. So when it comes to Universal, you look at their owned IPs, they've mostly tapped them out. Some of their IPs are pretty old. There haven't been any recent videos, books, things like that, films that have come to life. And so the interest in some of these owned IPs that Universal has is starting to wane a bit. So having new and fresh IPs to pull from is going to be an important part of being a competing and successful theme park. So that's why you see Universal licensing to these other IPs. But again, the problem is you're now paying licensing fees. So your profit margins are going to be really slim. So the big news that just hit the papers, just went out, is that Comcast, Universal's parent company, is now in the fight. They are actively pursuing the purchase of Warner Brothers, specifically their Discovery division. This is not all of Warner Brothers. This is just their Discovery division. This includes HBO Max, their Warner Brothers Pictures, DC Universe, and Warner Brothers Games. While other portions of Warner Brothers, things like the Food Network, HGTV, TLC, and Discovery Plus, primarily their television division, would then go somewhere else, potentially be purchased by somebody else, or continue to be owned by Warner Brothers. My understanding is there's been lots of talks over the years about splitting up Warner Brothers into two separate entities and selling off their Warner Brothers Discovery, all their movies and film franchises, wanting to sell that directly to Comcast while leaving the other portion for someone else. So this is a highly likely scenario that Comcast successfully purchases this Warner Brothers division, which brings massive possibilities to what they could now bring into their theme parks without having to pay licensing fees. Just look at these brands that Warner Brothers owns. It is like the who's of brands and IPs. The entire DC universe would now be at play. This is Aquaman, Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, The Flash, Shazam, and even Green Lantern. There are so many elements to the DC universe. This would be a major competitor to the Marvel universe that Disney now owns. Now again, they can keep the Marvel Superhero Island and Islands of Adventure, but they can't really do anything with it. So giving it up, I think, would be a big hit to them unless they had something to replace it with that's equally as strong, which could potentially be DC Universe. Now, you can argue all day that DC isn't as good as Marvel, and fine, and I'm not going to die on that hill at all. But it is potentially something they could use. We also have big HBO Max brands like Game of Thrones and House of Dragons. That is a massive, massive series that they could potentially bring in. Then you have some kids-themed things like Hanna-Barbera, Flintstones, Scooby-Doo, Spooky Island, anybody? Looney Tunes, and Sesame Street. That is a lot of kids brands to bring to the table to get interest in the younger generation. That's a lot of things they could potentially do there. From a Halloween Horror Nights perspective, it brings in new franchises and other things that they would own, like Evil Dead, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, and of course the It series with Pennywise and all of the owned properties around that. These are a lot of things. Now, they have brought these into Halloween Horror Nights in the past, and to the Universal Unleashed, they could use it there, but they've been licensing them. So this would allow them to bring them in without having to pay that licensing fee and not have to worry about any sort of negotiation to bring them back in. So we might see things like the Freddy and Jason universe happening, the crossover. We could see those coming to Halloween Horror Nights more often. This also brings in the Lord of the Rings and Hobbit film franchises. Now, we'll talk a little bit about that one and what that means, and does it really mean anything, a little bit later, but let me get through the rest of these. This also opens up possibilities now with Wizard of Oz and Wicked. So with the Wizard of Oz and Wicked musicals are technically owned by Warner Brothers today. The Wicked films are owned by Universal. So we could still bring Wicked into the picture, but it expands what you could potentially do with the Wicked and Wizard of Oz sort of universe by this Warner Brothers acquisition. We've also got other IPs like Beetlejuice, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Dune, even Godzilla. You've also got Goonies. I mean, think about a Pirates of the Caribbean attraction, but Goonies. I mean, I would be here for that. Like, no doubt that would be cool. Probably never gonna happen, but man, that would be cool. Another big one is Polar Express. They would own Polar Express. Imagine what you could do. And then lastly, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is another one. So there are just so many iconic IPs that would now be in play without having to worry about licensing fees, which means they'd be able to do more with them and not have to worry about them ever getting stripped out of their parks. That's the thing about a licensed IP, is if you're gonna go all in and create an entire world and a land around a particular IP, you've gotta have a really good long-term deal. Otherwise, it's the risk that you build all this stuff, spend all this money, you lose the IP, and then you gotta tear it all down or replace it. Not good business practice. So let's talk about some of the stuff they could do with these brands right off the top. The most obvious things are, again, Marvel Superhero Island could transition into DC Universe. While I absolutely love the Spider-Man attraction, I love that world, I would hate to see Spider-Man transition into something else. We may end up seeing that because they can't do anything with that space in Marvel. At some point, they're gonna have to let it go. This obviously brings in, again, the rumor of Wicked coming into the parks. They've talked about Wicked. We've been hearing quite a while about some sort of Wicked attractions. I personally hope for maybe something small or maybe a single dark ride versus an entire world or land dedicated to Wicked, because I'm not sure that there is enough interest to drive an entire world around Wicked, although it would be really cool to see the Yellow Brick Road, the Emerald Castle, all this stuff. I mean, you could definitely do something with it. I think it would be cool, but I'm not 100% sure if it deserves its own land, but you could do something there. Now let's talk about Polar Express. I mean, I think a lot of people have to agree. I mean, it's an older IP for sure. It's an older brand. Like, there hasn't been a Polar Express for a long time, but it's just one of those yearly Christmas things that just keeps coming back around. It sticks with you. It's iconic. It has the music. It has the fantasy. I mean, imagine a Polar Express overlay of some kind or area of the park that's dedicated to the Christmas time. You think about Seuss Landing in Islands of Adventure transforms into the Grinch, the Grinchmas. They have a Grinchmas Spectacular. They have a Grinch meet and greet. It's very much, that's a big Christmas element. They could do something similar for Polar Express somewhere else in the park. I just think it would open up a lot of cool things that they could do with it, but I don't know. Let's talk about the big one, Scooby-Doo and the Spooky Island. I hear this all the time. People comment all the time about things they want to see come to the parks or a new area for Epic Universe. I mean, that Spooky Island for years has just persisted out there with people like, man, I wish they would create a Spooky Island. It just resonated with people. And this would really open up the possibility that they could create a Spooky Island. They could literally create a Spooky Island expansion to Epic Universe, an entire new world, or even as a part of Epic Universe 2.0 when they build the 4th theme park over there next to Epic Universe and bridge them with the City Walk. It could be a land that's in that space. They could really build it, and I think it would be awesome. We, of course, have the Toon Lagoon replacement lingering out there. A lot of space being wasted. That big amphitheater's not being used. They need to kind of retheme that land. I just don't think it's super relevant anymore. This could be transformed into Looney Tunes or Sesame Street. I don't know how relevant those are either, but it does open up possibilities they could do there. I hope they do something different with it, but if they wanted to stick with some sort of like cartoony or fantastical like children's brand, they could expand it into something new with Warner Brothers acquisition and all those new IPs. And then let's talk Game of Thrones. I mean, there's no arguing that that is a massive brand IP. I wasn't a fan of how they ended the series, and that's because there was no book to follow, and to be honest, I think the ending was terrible and almost ruined the whole series. But It's still iconic. They have House of Dragon out there, which is kind of a mixed bag, but it is still a big brand. They could definitely do something Game of Thrones. I will say Game of Thrones is very adult. There's a lot of bloodshed. There's a lot of craziness going on there that I don't know would appeal to kids at all. So I'm not sure that I see Game of Thrones coming to one of their theme parks anytime soon. Maybe. I'm just not sold on it. But something similar that could go way better is Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings has been hanging out there for a while. We've talked about this in previous videos. With the Warner Brothers acquisition, they would own the rights to the existing New Line Cinema films of the Lord of the Rings trilogy and The Hobbit. However, Embracer Group, which I've talked about, they purchased the rights for the video games, for new films, for theme parks. They own that to be able to do stuff with Lord of the Rings. So this Warner Brothers acquisition wouldn't really pick up those rights to do anything with Lord of the Rings. So that's a bit disappointing. They would still have to license that through Embracer Group unless they somehow acquired that from them. But again, they had their chance to buy it. Embracer Group picked it up and they didn't purchase it. So I'm not sure that I see that happening. So Lord of the Rings, we'll see. I don't know if it's likely anytime soon, but it would be a licensing agreement. So this is just, I mean, there's so many IPs and possibilities. It's insane. I mean, this is a game changer for them. Bringing in all these fresh IPs instead of having some of the stale ones that they have and continuing to lean on things like Jurassic Park, which is kind of like, okay, we've seen the Jurassic Park. How much more do we need? Let's get some fresh IPs out there. This does it. This would also enable them to no longer be paying licensing fees for Harry Potter, because Harry Potter is Warner Brothers, so they wouldn't have to pay the massive amount of licensing fees they're having to pay with Warner Brothers on Harry Potter today. Imagine that, the amount of money that they're going to save by not having to pay these licensing fees over and over again. They would just own it, would be huge. Beetlejuice, a lot of their HHN properties that they keep licensing now go away. And of course, Marvel potentially going away if they get rid of it and replace it with DC. This could be huge, could be a game changer for them, game changer for theme parks, really poise them to continue to progress and be super successful as a major player in the theme park industry. It would be a big price tag to buy this, but it could help them be profitable year over year. So anyhow, that's what I've got. Tell me what you think. Are you hoping this Warner Brothers purchase goes through? Are you excited about any of the brands that this would bring to the table? What do you see coming? What do you think might be first on the list if we do get this Warner Brothers brand? Love to hear from you down in the comments. As always, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Thank you so much for watching. Till I see you next time, the Nova way is the easy way. Bye-bye, everybody.